Erie got pelted again with like a blizzard. So lake effect.
I'm just gonna hold the shade here. That helps. You
All right.
surprised?
Yep, I've got.
You surprised, Clark?
Yeah, we're live. It's working.
Eddie, I wouldn't be more surprised if I woke up with my head sewn to the carpet. I'd be more surprised than I am right now.
Funniest part of Christmas Vacation.
For me? Or
Yeah.
for that? Probably in the department store. When he's
It's Hooter.
getting Hooter, hotter than it is.
Hooter.
That's like a log, not like a log that you think. I think I said like a Yule log, It's a bit nippy out. Did I say nipple?
Nipple? Nipply. Oh, yeah.
It's a bit nipply out. Did I say nipple?
Mine was the squirrel.
Oh yeah, that
The
was good.
squirrel on the back of his jacket and they're running up the stairs and yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't. I was like,
maybe just people aren't expecting us to be here right now because this is weird.
well, it's a different time.
Yeah,
So no one in here.
not yet.
'Tis a season to be merry. Well, that's my name. Okay.
Oh, shit. And we're going, I think it's the season, a Saturday shopping, it's probably, I don't know, people are busy this time of year on a Saturday.
Yeah, possibly. That's me, by the way. It's a sub account I've got just to test things.
Oh, okay.
Wanted to make sure it would come through. Okay, we've got some people in the house now. It looks like I've got 13 people sitting there quietly observing.
Say hello.
There we go. Hey,
everybody.
Marie. What's going on, Jennifer? I'm like, don't stalk. Don't sit there and just watch us. That's bordering on a little creepy. I mean, I know you got all this to just quietly observe and enjoy, but there's this up here too. So engage me up here. It's hard to hear me. Let me turn up my gain. Is that better? Can you hear me now? What year was that commercial? Can you hear me now? It feels like it was in the 80s, but it was probably what, 2000s? Because we had cell phones. So
Yeah, it was like 2010, 11, I think.
wow, it seems so much older than that.
It seems like I can't believe how long ago it was. I think it was like 2000, 2001 was what's up? That whole
That one feels a lot older.
still pretty shocking.
That one, and if you see it, if you actually look back and see it, it's
Yeah.
really, really like it even looks old. And they grab the phone on the wall, and the guy's literally like picking up the phone, and he's on the couch, and he's on a corded telephone.
Yeah.
So that's probably what dates it. All right. Well, hello and welcome to another live recording of the Three of You Mirror, a talk show, a podcast, a chance for a bunch of friends just to get together every week and discuss a couple things, three things specifically relevant to the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, Gen X era pop culture. Every week, one of us will come together with three topics to discuss for the show. And the cool thing is, within these three topics, there is something that connects one to the other. And some weeks it's pretty easy and pretty obvious. And some weeks it's a head scratcher. And this week I'm the host with the most, and it's probably somewhere in the middle. So I'm John Katrides. I'm joined by two amazing friends and co-hosts. I'll let you guys say hello.
Hello, I'm Rochelle O'Black, better known as Gen X Show Online. A lot of you probably know me, although I've been absent for a while. New year, new me. Maybe.
I'm Chris Clues, better known as Chris Clues, speaker and author, and I write and speak about what 80s pop culture can teach us for life and work.
And this is the Three of You Mirror.
Here come the floating heads.
All right. So my topics this week, if you guys are ready, span the 70s, the 80s, and one is just timeless. Has no parameters of when it was popular. Has no boundaries or borders. It's international in its scope. My three topics are Heathers, horror, and hookers. I even got the alliteration going through it. Now, the hookers, you all might say, what is that? That you'll see how relevant it is, because for whatever reason, hookers were a major trope, a theme in our movies, in our music, in our television shows. I fully expected that's how I was going to be deflowered, because that's what pop culture was telling me. I was, in fact, wrong. But that's a story for another day. Let's start with Heathers. And this is kind of dual in scope, right? I think we've all seen the Gen X movie with icons called Heathers, but Heathers and Jennifers and Missies were like a big deal when we were growing up too. Like the whole thing of Heather B, is Heather B here? Is Heather K here? Is Heather L here? I had at least 5 Heathers in my classes growing up. So you guys can feel free to take the next 15 minutes and discuss the movie or discuss the Heathers in your life. Hey, David from Utah, good to see you.
I don't know that I had very many Heathers in my life. There was a lot of Amy's, Lisa's, and I'm Rochelle, but there was a lot of Michelles. The tons.
Yeah,
of
Missy was huge.
Yeah, and there was also a lot of Jens, Jennifers, Jennies. I think that's probably still common than today. And there was Gen K and Gen O and Gen whatever they were calling out in the things. But yeah, I'd love to discuss either one of them.
Go at it.
I mean, I can do both too, because I love the movie Heathers. I'm a big fan of like dark comedy. Love that movie Heathers, and the cast, of course, which was awesome as well. And then Heathers, for me, when I think of Heathers, I think of Heather Locklear, Heather Thomas. Those are the Heathers that come to mind for me when I think of. I don't recall having a ton of Heathers in my classroom, in my classes. I think there were a few, but having the name Chris, now that was a name that was very common, and why people always call me by my last name, Clues.
Or John.
I don't think my daughter has any Melissas in her class. So hold on. I don't think she has any Melissas, any Michelles. I don't think she's got a Heather. They're all very unique names now. The whole, I don't think there's a single John in her class. And now, I mean, there were like 15 of us, going around. So that's insane. But I'm going to pivot and go to the movie Heathers. Could that movie with that script be aired today without getting major blowback?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of dark comedy out there. I think it could.
I don't know.
Which part of it are you thinking?
Well, and I mean, they blow up the school.
That's
commit acts of violence against the other schoolmates. Yeah. They bully and kill the kids because they gay rumors. So much about it is absolutely. Listen, we'd be fools to say we don't evolve as we grow. That's the whole point of growing as a person, as a society. It's okay that we change a little bit. Would I change this movie? I wouldn't. I'm not apologetic about any of it. Realize that it's for entertainment purposes only. Throw up whatever warning you need to throw up at the beginning of the movie and leave it alone. But I get why somebody today would look at it and say, holy moly, you guys laughed at that? I get why they don't understand it, because they're seeing one part of our childhood without seeing it in its total scope. We laughed at it because of the rest of our childhood as well.
Well, see, I didn't laugh at it. I saw it as a dark comedy, and I saw it as a commentary, but I didn't think it was a funny dark comedy. And I've seen funny dark comedies before. Do you understand?
Parts of it, Christian Slater's lines, the one-liners he had me laughing all the way through it. He was doing a Jack Nicholson impression from the minute he started the movie. I mean, I found it both dark and humorous, because I could be just a sick person. I don't know. We have those movies like Mean Girls now, where, for us in the 80s, just like everything, we did it over the top, which is another great movie, by the way. But we did it over the top. And that's why the 80s was such a great decade, because there were no holds barred. I mean, everyone just went for it, regardless of what it was.
And I think, again, that's why the decade stands out. It stands out because there were no creative boundaries. And when there's no creative boundaries, you get pretty awesome stuff, in my opinion.
And I think whenever they were very subtly too making fun of the class system that existed within our high school environments at that time. So you could really, really relate to that because you had the table full of the jocks, the geeks, the blah, 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 and the popular girls. And that trope's been made over and over again as well.
Well, and did it have any truth? Did you have those popular mean girls growing up in your school? Were you one, Rochelle? Were you one, Chris?
A mean girl?
I was not a mean girl. I wouldn't say I was at the top of anything. I was just kind of like friends with everybody, but I was not one of the mean girls. I couldn't stand, in fact, the mean girls. I, to this day, can't stand even hanging around. And if you think the mean girl trope left women, it didn't. There's still groups of mean girls that you just don't want to hang with. Even today, 50 some years old, you could spot them and you're like, yeah, I don't want to be a part of that. Whether it be at a sports event or something with your kid's school, it still exists.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think there'll always, unfortunately, be those cliques in high schools. And I do think, again, one thing the 80s did really well was expose those cliques and bring them to the surface and talk about them in a lot of different movies that we had. Including the Heathers. But yeah, I don't think that's going to ever go away. Unfortunately, you're always going to have that group of girls and guys, the popular ones, and how they treat everybody else. We had a group of popular kids who were cool, and then we had a group of popular kids that were not.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And you're right, John, some of the quotes that he had in that movie. I mean, listen, I love the quote where he says, "Today was great. Chaos is great. Chaos is what killed the dinosaurs, darling."
He just goes on and on. He's like, I love you, but I'm going to have to kill you. And I mean, it was funny. You found yourself laughing. Kristen asks which was worse, Heather or Jawbreakers. Heather created other Heather movies. So Rochelle mentioned Mean Girls. There's Mean Girls 2. There's the new Mean Girls that came out. There was Jawbreaker. None of them were as raw and edgy, in my opinion, as the original. To Chris's point, it wasn't worried about backlash. It wasn't worried about, there were no boundaries. Nothing was left, they made fun of suicide. These kids pretended they made it look like nothing was off the table. And I don't remember, the 80s had its share of moms writing letters. It had its share of committees trying to throw labels on our music. So there was the other side of it. But they never won. Even when they won, even when Tipper Gore got her labels that she wanted so badly, that just told us which albums to buy. Now you made it easier for us. John Denver famously said, "You're going to end my career because I'll be the only album out there without a label that no one's buying."
That's right. Yeah, but that's again, I think what made it great was that there were no boundaries. And so you got these, you could take anything to any level that you wanted. And then people decided if they wanted to invest their money into their hard-earned money, their $2 into a movie ticket. And I will say that Heathers came out in 1988.
Yes.
Okay.
87.
87. Okay. So in 1989, one of the greatest sitcoms of all time started in Seinfeld. And they were mean girls. I mean, mean guys.
No, you were right. It's 88. 88. It was early 88.
So 89, you have one of the greatest sitcoms of all time. And let me tell you something. That cast, you could have made them the Heather. They could have been in the Heathers. The way that if you look at the end of Seinfeld, the way that they treated everybody in that show was awful. It was 9 or 10 years of the Heathers.
Well, Poppy did pee on the couch. So.
It's a great show, but I mean, still, like, they made fun of everybody.
But they got what was coming to them in the end. And to your point, Chris makes this point. If you don't follow Chris and you want to learn the actual lessons we learned in the 80s, Chris has a book you can find on Amazon. He's a keynote speaker. If you have an opportunity to go see it and watch it firsthand, I cannot recommend it strongly enough, because the 80s weren't just about fun. It was about lessons too. Whether you were watching G.I. Joe or He-Man on Saturday morning cartoons, whether you're watching our movies where the bullies always got what they deserved at the end of Revenge of the Nerds. The 80s taught us things. And Chris often talks about things we can learn specific to the workplace, but you can take it generally by living in the 80s. That's what I loved about it is, yes, bad things happened in our movies, but most often by the end, people got what was coming to them. And Heathers, dude, the mean girl, the mean people, the bad, they got what was coming to them.
Yeah. Yes.
One of my favorite lines from there is when they're in the cafeteria. You were talking about Christian Slater having great lines. When the one girl, the blonde, and I can't think of her name at the moment, and she says, "Well, F me gently with the chainsaw." That one was that line right there was just stuck with me for all these years. I thought, well, if you really want to tell someone something, that line could really sock it to them.
And it works for men and women.
Yeah.
And Christian Slater's character too, like throughout the movie, they were dropping these little hints to you that this actually was insane. And these people were insane. And he said that the extreme always seems to make an impression. Again, going back to the dinosaurs, he loves chaos. It's what, with the dinosaurs and chaos. And the extreme always seems to make an impression. Here we are, however, 36 years later, 36 years later, talking about the movie Heathers and how absolutely insane it was. The extreme makes an impression.
Well, and so I've got a 21-year-old daughter. I have a 12-year-old daughter that there's no way in hell is going to see this movie anytime soon. I didn't see this movie. This is not one of those, I saw Jaws at 7. I saw this age appropriately enough at 18 or 19. Thank God. But she saw it and her mouth literally dropped open. She's like, "You guys watch this as kids?" I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, really? Like, I'm like, "Yeah." I don't make apologies for it. Take a step back and realize that we knew it was a movie. I go, listen, you're getting up on your high horse and you're getting up on your soapbox and you're looking down at me as you're kicking hookers out of the car on Grand Theft Auto. What's the difference? You're playing these wickedly violent video games where you're the first person shooter. Know, and your excuse is always, I know it's a game. When sane people play games, it doesn't turn them insane. When sane people listen to explicit lyrics in our songs, when they listen to NWA or Public Enemy, when they listen to songs that evoke maybe violence, listen, it doesn't turn us insane. At least I don't think it did, unless the insanity hit itself well. I'm like, so your video games and your music was our movies. You guys are policing one aspect of your pop culture, but not the rest.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's a great point.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize this actually, but after you said that Heathers was going to be one of the topics. Sorry, I thought I heard my dog chasing an iguana. When I heard that Heathers was going to be one of the topics, that they actually had a Heathers musical in 2014.
Didn't know that one.
Yeah. Yeah, you couldn't say that now.
Gina gave us another great line. I love my dead gay son. It was all about beauty and love. It was a great movie. And it was dark. And some would say it bordered on horror, which brings us, strangely enough, unless you all have something else you want to mention, to our next topic.
Well, I do want to just mention that I think, real quickly, that Christian Slater, Winona Ryder, they were two huge actors in the 80s and both very, very talented, like wide range. And it's great to see both of them getting this kind of, I don't want to say second bite at the apple, because Christian Slater in, Mr. Robot? And now he's in the new Dexter show, which is Dexter Origins, which I think is going to be pretty cool. Like the origins of Dexter, I guess he plays his father. And of course, Winona Ryder in Stranger Things. It's really cool to see both of them kind of coming back around because they are a big part of Gen X, huge part of Gen X. That's all I want to say.
No worries.
I like it.
I love it. John says my mother shattered my Slayer album simply because she thought it was about homicide. Well, there were many mothers all across America that had read in their they went to their book clubs or they did whatever. My mom came and asked me in a very thick Greek accent if any of my records played messages from Satan when played backwards. And I assured her, no, my Wham and Grease albums were both safe. Because I think at the time, those were the only things I had on vinyl. Both purchased by my older brother. I did not buy the Wham album. ABBA might have been in there too.
By the way, John Asian said, we don't need movies like Heather's Hollywood is it in real time.
Oh, jeez.
It's kind of true, actually.
Now,
Buck says reruns of Dukes of Hazzard are no longer allowed because of a flag on a roof of a car. Listen, everyone's allowed to have their opinion. Everyone's allowed to when people are like, don't be offended. Be offended. Be as offended as you want to be. I'm perfectly okay with you walking around offended. It is your right. But your sense of offensiveness does not dictate what I get to see, do, or say. There are repercussions to what I think, do, say, right? We all are adults. We all know that our words have power, and we all know to police them if we want to. And if we don't, then this will be the last episode of our podcast. So we police it because we live in a society with rules and a civilization, and that's okay. But it can go too far, and when it does, we push back. That's all I got to say on that. Horror. Now, I know, Shell, you love horror. The reason I put horror in is I've just been on a Stephen King tear on movies lately. And not the good ones, not the Shawshank Redemptions, not Stand By Me. I'm talking Cujo. I'm talking Christine. Firestarter with Drew Barrymore is one of my favorites and an underrated one at that. I mean, it is so much fun watching little tiny Studio 54 going Drew Barrymore at the age of 8, blowing up the world around her. I watched Carrie the other day, which probably aged the worst of all of them. Parts of it are laughable now that it's Sissy's face, but I forgot that it was the Greatest American Hero dude that played the boyfriend in Carrie until I watched.
He did. I don't know if I could like visually recall that now.
William Catt.
It's been a long time since
William Catt was the boyfriend in Carrie, and he didn't have his red suit, so he couldn't stop all the carnage. But that's unfortunate.
He didn't have Believe It or Not.
He did not. Believe it or not, he didn't have it.
I was just gonna say Cat's Eye. I was trying to think of it. Is that's the one with I think Nastasia Kinski? Is that the one? Or is that a different one? Nastasia, maybe he'll know if because my brain was sitting there. I was like, okay, wait a minute. I know all of I read all the Stephen King books.
I read all the books.
Yeah, and he used to do a couple even made for TV movie kind of horror things. Like It was made years ago, years and years and years ago. It was a terrible movie.
Yeah, with John Boyd.
Yeah, and then they remade it.
Yes. The Stand was a really good made for TV movie with Molly Ringwald.
Yeah.
Buck said Salem's Lot movie terrified him as a kid, terrified me as a kid as well. That is one I have not even gone back to watch as an adult because it scared me so much as a kid.
Pet
Cemetery. That may have been my first Stephen King book. As I think back, it was either I think Salem's Lot might have been my first. Dude, we were up late as children. Yeah. Like, okay, time to go to bed meant time to go to your room. My parents I was never really tucked in. Despite what 50s television reruns taught me, I never was really expecting a bedtime story. I read my own bedtime story and it was Stephen King. I read my own bedtime story and it was horror and blood and guts. And at 9 years old, kept me awake till 4 a.m, listening to every sound in the house until I finally became hardened to it.
I think the last one I read from him was The Dome. And it was as long as The Stand. The Stand was a very, very, very long movie. But I was going to say Pet Sematary was the absolute, that movie freaked me out. But even more so, the book freaked me out. Just the idea of your cat, your child coming back to life to freaking come in and kill you. Like that was, duh.
And it has the Ramones on the soundtrack. I mean, come on! Like any movie that has the Ramones on the soundtrack, I'm in. Like that's
and little Gage. Little Gage took out Herman Munster. I mean, how good does that get? Yeah, you got David taking out Goliath. But yeah, I kind of said this before. The trope of horror movies are that there are certain rules that never break, and they are you do not You do not take care. You never take out the children, and you never take out the pets. And
Mhm.
Pet Cemetery
Mhm.
literally said, you know what? That's
I'm breaking
exactly what we're going to do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we're going to do it demonstratively horrible. You're going to watch Gage bounce off the front of a Mack truck.
Yeah.
And that scene building up to itself, because you knew what the movie was about. You knew that was about to happen. If you read the book, you knew 100% it was coming. And
Yeah.
I just remember being like, no,
No, don't run out there right yet.
So with you guys with horror, like, because one of the things I love about horror in general is that there's all these different like little splinter genres within horror. So, you can like all of horror, or you can like pieces of horror. For example, you might like the ones where Alfred Hitchcock always talked about how he liked to do horror where you got scared by the sounds and the movements, but not the blood. There's very little blood in his movies compared to, say, I don't know, like something that was just complete gore, like Chopping Mall in the 80s, which is just all gore and heads flying off and arms getting cut off and all kinds of crazy stuff. And then you have, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is very gritty. It feels so real and almost like a documentary because it's so gritty and special effects weren't what they were. So I guess the question I would throw out is, is there a particular genre of horror that you like more than another, or it's just horror in general?
I'll take any horror in general for the most part. I don't care for the bloodbath movies very much at all. I love them when they have an overbearing sense of evil that has caused a lot of the horror. I love post-apocalyptic horror, and I love space horror. Space horror is one of my favorites. I know. Like I just love it. So and monster movies too. You know what I'm saying? I love it all.
The monster movies and all that we grew up in, but for me, it's Stephen King horror was the smart horror. It was the sophisticated version of horror, and I like that. Then right underneath it, you had the 90s that came along with like the Final Destination movies, and I really like those because there was an overlying theme, an arc, a plot. You knew what was going on, and they came up with they took what Friday the 13th invented, which was really ingenious ways of killing people, and they took it next level. Friday the 13th was, okay, you're gonna get a
spear through both of you,
through your eye. They were really good about it. But then here comes the 90s with its own edge and Final Destination movies, and they're like, hold my beer. And now all of a sudden you have a whole different there's an entire generation of us that will not drive behind a log truck. Somebody write, I'm terrified of somebody slicing my tendon because of Pet Cemetery. That's a fear that's real. I won't walk near the edge of my bed, but I will never drive behind a log truck.
When I saw that comment when it came up about the sliced tendon, and it just still gives me chills to this day. I mean, I've watched people The Hills Have Eyes was pretty good. Stab and do all kinds of things, but somehow that tendon, it just hurt. It just hurt.
Because it leaves you helpless.
Yes.
He wasn't killed by that. He was rendered helpless.
Yeah.
But they did that in this movie, A Trilogy of Terror, back in, I think it was late 70s. And it was a little this little who came out with it, and he stabbed people in the tendons. And I was like I think 8 or 9. I should not have been watching that.
Same. Scared
the hell out of me. And then there was the one that I'll never forget, and there was an episode of Seinfeld where it was Mr. Marbles, the ventriloquist doll, that was magic. And I think it was Anthony Hopkins, and he had a ventriloquist doll that was telling him to kill people, if I remember correctly. And I had a ventriloquist doll when I was like 5. I don't know why my parents got it. If I asked for it, I got it. I think that movie came out when I was 7, and I wanted that thing out of the house. Like, I was just like, get it out. I don't want it anywhere near here. That thing's going to come to life at night. I don't,
Like the poltergeist clown.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. It's going to suck you under the bed or the tree.
That had to have killed sales of those clowns.
Yeah.
Like, there must have been unanticipated repercussions for the toy industry. Chucky took out the My Buddy doll. My buddy, my buddy. And all of a sudden, here comes Chucky, and it's like done. Whereas I would have thought it would have had the opposite effect given our generation. But My Buddy really did get destroyed by the Chucky movies.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, while you guys are talking, I'm going to
I could talk about so many of these things for so long, the horror movies, because I think there came a point when I sort of stopped watching horror as much because I didn't have as much time. But even just recently, like my son, he loves horror too, and he's like 17, 18. I probably, because I was so young, I probably let him watch too many scary movies too young, and he comes up with recommendations for me. He's like, "Mom, you got to watch The Babadook. Mom, you got to watch the," and that's that we share that. Well, he's almost 18 now, so anybody out there that's going, why is your son recommending these things? Well, Mom loved them, so.
The ones that
Marie brings up Christine. There's certain things that you didn't think could be scary, and then somehow King, among others, find a way to make them scary. Chucky. Screw you! I'll kick that doll across the room. That'll be the end of that. And then you watch the movie, and you're like, okay, I guess I can see it. I just love that stuff.
Well, was it Shell, I think, that said you like when it's just there's evil lurking in the movie? And so I think of like the more, I love 80s horror, but the more modern ones like Insidious, like those kind of ones, isn't that the one, if I'm remembering correctly, it's Josh Hartnett, doesn't he like live, he's an author that lives in a house where somebody was murdered. That
sounds right.
I didn't care for it. I know that so many people loved Insidious. I did not care. As a horror fanatic, I did not care for Insidious. No, I did not care for
How about The Strangers?
That to me was like, eh.
I liked it because, again, it took the Alfred Hitchcock approach. It scared you with sounds and, just weird stuff, and there wasn't any blood at the end. You mentioned Poltergeist earlier. So on my Christmas tree, I have a Poltergeist ornament.
I love
nice.
It. Yeah.
This
is how sick my sister and my stepbrother and I are because we're really into like true crime and serial killers. So my sister got me this one.
Is that the Menendez brothers?
That's the Night Stalker. Richard
that's the Night Stalker. Okay.
A nice red and white snowflake.
Oh, how sweet.
A couple funny comments. First of all, Jeffrey Thomas, good to see you, buddy.
Hi, Jeff.
If you guys don't follow Jeff. Jeff is hilarious. He's also a Gen X influencer. Kryptonite Fitness, my buddy, good to see you on there. Record Hound, got a lot of people jumping in now. But somebody said we put, I think, Metallica and Iron Maiden in our Teddy Ruxpin dolls. That kind of proved who we were. I lived in front, so we had a major old apple orchard behind our house growing up. We grew up in the sticks, but it wasn't producing apples. It was dead. And they were just biding time to plow it over. My younger brother accidentally, while playing out there with a friend, burnt it all down. So then, as creepy as an old apple orchard was, they then replaced it with a cornfield, a huge cornfield right in my backyard, right as I'm reading Children of the Corn. And I'm telling you, when I hear... I don't like any children with over biblical names. If there is a Jedediah in my daughter's class, I'm like, stay away from him. Stay away from him. Malachi? If there's a Malachi in my daughter's class, I'm like, no, you're not. Malachi is not invited to your birthday party. Malachi doesn't need to know where we live.
Yeah. He wants you too, Malachi.
Malachi.
But, I took it to heart in my daughter's preschool, the worst behaved children. If she came home and said somebody was in the corner the entire day, it was always Jedediah. It was always, always. Prove me wrong.
No, you're right. That's a good point. Somebody mentioned When a Stranger Calls.
Yes.
That one.
That was Gina.
Whoa. The call is coming from inside the house.
Yeah.
That scared the hell out of me. You just, because I had babysitters growing up and I babysat a couple of times on my street, and that movie was, it was ingrained.
So, was it lost on all of us that that's impossible? How could the call be coming from inside the house unless you had two
different lines? If you had two different lines.
Oh, in the 70s? Oh, excuse me, Mr. Rockefeller. You had a separate line? I'm saying, Mr. Carrington.
You're asking me how it could be done. I'm saying you have two different lines.
And I'm telling you, it was the 70s. It was one day at a time. It was good times. We were all living in the projects. No one had a second line in their house.
Well,
you might as well have said because they were calling on a cell phone. It was equally possible or probable.
Well, Stranger Calls, they lived in a 2-floor home, so maybe they did. I don't know. Maybe he had a home office. He was ahead of time.
So I'm going to borrow a note from Chris Klutz. We're going to move this forward, but I do want to mention before we move on, and then you guys can, of course, kick in with final thoughts on horror. I love how many big name celebrities cut their teeth on horror.
Mm-hmm.
It was very much like soap operas as an entry point to get in. I remember wanting to get one movie at Blockbuster and, of course, grabbing another. Let's go get some scary movies from Blockbuster. And the ones we want, there's one cutting Class, and all of a sudden you look and there's Brad Pitt in it. It was like his first. Jennifer Aniston in the space horror that I guess you love, Rochelle, because Leprechaun made its way into space.
Yeah.
And Jennifer Aniston was on it. It's so many actors.
Kevin Bacon.
Drew Barrymore. What's that?
Kevin Bacon.
Kevin Bacon, Friday the 13th.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I lost my train of thought. Damn it! And I had something fun to say. And if you are a big horror fan, I think arguably one of the movies that really propelled horror back in the day, even when they didn't have sound, was Nosferatu, and the new one is coming out.
I heard that.
On Christmas Day of all days.
Yeah.
They're releasing Nosferatu, and I'm actually really looking forward to that because that was one creepy ass vampire.
Do you know who wrote that? It was actually, he wrote a novel called Nosferatu as well, which was Stephen King's son, and he has a different pen name. It's not King.
He wrote the show, the TV show.
No, he wrote a book years ago, and I can't think of his name at the moment, but it's Stephen King's son wrote a book called Nosferatu, and it was about NOS4ATU, and it was a license plate of a car.
Bentley. Rolls-Royce Bentley. Yeah, it was a TV show. They did a TV show. It's pretty good.
Okay, I didn't see the show.
Yeah, but this is like the old school Nosferatu.
The black and white?
Well, it's the old black and white one, but they redid it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's coming out Christmas Day.
Nice. Christmas Day. Perfect. Nightmare.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Somebody did mention Faces of Death. I'm one of the, I'll make fun of it in videos. I didn't watch any of those. The fact that it was, that was like our Driver Ed movies on crack. I just didn't want to see it. I'm like, Driver Ed movies were about as bad as it got for me, about real people meeting their grisly end. I didn't need to see it on VHS otherwise.
Okay.
Those were pretty grisly.
But something about Faces of Death. My dad had a small production company when I was growing up. And when those movies came out, he was like, and I don't know if he was trying to make me feel better, but he said, I know an actor that died 4 times in the first one.
Okay, that makes me feel better.
He's like, don't worry. He's like, I can't say that all of it was fake, but he did say, that guy died 4 times. He got, eaten by some people. He got killed by an alligator in a parachute. And and he's like, I hired him just the other day. So he's alive.
And Record Out mentions Kevin Bacon going further into Animal House, and others have mentioned Johnny Depp. And it wasn't necessarily the first movies were horror, but it was their early movies, if nothing else. But you are correct, Record Hound. I do remember Kevin Bacon in the first Animal House, which, listen, Animal House, great transition point. I'm pretty sure there was a hooker somewhere in that movie. It had to be.
Yeah.
Which I'll sum us up a little bit. Up to this point in our episode, we've talked about Heathers and horror. And now we're going to end the segments on the topics with hookers. And a reminder, there is some sense to my madness. There is something very real, someone very real, a thing, a person, something connects these 3 topics together. But before we get to the reveal, we're going to talk about hookers for about 15 minutes. Now, let me explain. It wasn't just to talk about hookers for the sake of hookers. I remember so many movies growing up, whether it was Bachelor Party or Tom Cruise in Risky Business with Rebecca De Mornay, the happy hooker with a heart that was help me. Julia Roberts. I mean, people forget she was a hooker. Mm-hmm. She wasn't even a lady of the night or a prostitute. She was a hooker.
Yeah.
Hookers were everywhere in our pop culture in the 70s and 80s. It was how the nerd lost his virginity. It was how the party got started. It was always tongue in cheek. It was expected. If you're going to a bachelor party, bring on the hookers. They were everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
$50, make you holler.
She gets paid to do the wild thing. TJ Hooker, Lola says. There we go. Another hooker.
Yeah. Risky Business. Yeah. So, I mean, that was a great pull.
Rebecca De Mornay. I mean, she was a prostitute.
Yeah.
She robbed him blind.
Great movie.
Great movie.
Guido the
And
Killer.
we were
Guido the Killer
kids.
Pimp.
We were kids. Like they always talk about sexual content in movies. This wasn't just sexual content. It wasn't just two kids making it on the beach.
Jody just mentioned one of my favorite all-time underrated movies.
Oh,
And it's all
Night
about
Shift.
hookers. Night Shift. I mean, when Michael Keaton breaks down the word prostitution for everybody, he's like, let's just break it down. Pros, okay, all of you guys are pros. Tit, that belongs in the word here. You, meaning you, and shun, to push away. He's like, that shouldn't even be in this word. Just get the shun out of here. That whole movie's about it. That's awesome. I love that movie. God,
Jamie Lee Curtis is a hooker in Trading Places. Like when I came up with this idea, I was thinking of so many, but even I didn't. Like I'm watching these, I can't keep up with the comments. They literally were everywhere, and they almost always had a heart. The hooker was sometimes the nicest woman in the movie.
someone mentioned Blue Lagoon. How does Blue Lagoon have a hooker in it?
They went fishing.
I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm not getting that one. Only the guy. Who was the guy in the movie besides Brooke Shields? That was the greatest American hero.
Christopher Atkins.
Christopher Atkins. Okay, yeah,
Last American Virgin.
I remember that one.
Ridiculous. And yes, TJ Hooker, you got to give it to him.
Yeah.
I mean, they made a joke about it for the name of a cop show. Last American Virgin. Jamie Lee Curtis was, but like I said, they were nice. Jamie Lee Curtis was nice. Julia Roberts was
Trading
a
Places,
sweetheart. And often, sometimes they'd be like, if you just want, it was always like the trope was the sensitive young man that couldn't get laid on his own, so they throw him into this scary hooker, and she's like, sit down, honey, just you sit down, this is my job, I'm good at this. And she was like the voice of reason and calmed him down and was almost motherly in her ability to take his flower, so to speak. What are you nodding like that, Shell?
No, because I was sitting there reading the comments and I'm thinking, and it's amazing to me, this trope, how often like you see in these movies where like a father facilitated some of this for his son, and there was he was the middleman playing for his son, and you're like, it blows your mind now to think about that.
There was a lot of realness to that. I'll share a story. And it's not going to go where you think it's going. In Greece was always like the country Greece, where my parents were from. I had uncles that still lived there. I have 2 million cousins overseas still. My mom had 6 brothers and sisters, big family. Anyway, my Uncle John, the last time I was in Greece, like came up to me and is like, so, have you done it yet? And I was like 14 at this particular trip. And I'm like, no. And he told my mom he was going to take me to the hookers because there was something wrong with me. And my mom's like, you like hell you are.
No.
And my cousins are like, we all went. And I'm like, what is wrong with you people? And 2 of my cousins are smiling from ear to ear. The one with the ticks, now I'm beginning to understand a little bit more what happened to him. But I'm like, Jesus, it was normal. And it was normal in America at one point too, I guess. It wasn't, movies are a mirror to what we see in real life. I think there was a time that it wasn't as uncommon as we think. Somebody even mentioned American Gigolo. So the guys, there's Richard Gere going the other side of it. Yeah. He was the guy in and then he was the hooker in the other one. I'm losing my mind.
World's oldest profession. That's what they call it. You know what I mean? It's just the world's oldest profession.
And nowadays, I think to John's point too, in so many of these movies, they were an intricate part of the story. An important character, a deeper character. Jamie Lee Curtis only mentioned Ophelia in Trading Places. I mean, she is the conduit that makes the whole thing happen at the end of the movie. They don't get to the place that they're at the end of the movie, Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy's characters, without Ophelia. She is the smartest one of the 3, and she's the one who gets them to that end point. She helps both of them. Whereas today, a lot of times it's a darker character. They've got all of these issues, and they're not. I don't know. I feel like they don't allow those types of characters to develop like they did.
You mean Happy
Kristen,
Hooker?
I promise you I didn't go. I didn't say I didn't want to go, but Mama was in the house. I wasn't going anywhere.
I mean, intricate part of the movie or the show instead of just getting killed.
It was a necessary plot device in so many of our shows growing up. You don't have police academies. You don't have Porky's. You know, Porky's, the trip to the whorehouse in Porky's was an integral part of that. It was a huge part of the movie. I think Porky's 2 took place in the whorehouse, didn't it?
I don't remember Porky's 2. I just remember Porky's 1 in the shower scene. And
Pretty sure it was a pretty important part of the best little whorehouse in Texas. It was a plot device when writers were in the movies in the 70s and 80s and they're in the writing room and like, we're missing something. We're almost there. We need something. And invariably someone's like hookers because they wrote it in.
Yeah. Because everybody loves a hooker,
Taxi
right?
Driver, Jodie Foster. That was,
Dark.
Kryptonite Fitness says it hasn't gone away in society. It's just gone online. I could see that. Brad Pitt was a male hooker in Thelma and Louise. I mean, I think he was a himbo, but was he paid?
I think he
I don't think he was paid. They picked him up on the side of the road. Yeah, he was just a himbo.
No, he was an opportunist that he got paid with thievery, but you know.
Deuce Bigelow.
That's right, he stole. I forgot about that.
Deuce Bigelow.
Mel Bigelow.
Bigelow.
Mm-hmm.
But
to Kryptonite's point, to my buddy JC's point, it's online now. You know, it's quieter. They don't have to be sitting in whorehouses waiting. They're just sitting on their cell phone, you know, waiting for somebody to text them, and off they go. Or, you know, with things like, I think the same plot devices in movies today would be used by a Tinder moment or people just hooking up with each other. They don't need to go to those extremes. We've said it before. Porn was harder to find in the 80s. So was sex. You had to go to dark places to find it, I guess.
Someone said I would have paid him. Kryptonite. I would have paid Brad Pitt too. I'd have been on that list for young Brad Pitt. What they call that?
Tell you, even as a guy,
he's my hall
I
pass.
remember
Okay.
the scene. I can see him with the what was it, a blow hair dryer or something?
Uh-huh.
And he took his shirt off. And I mean, I wasn't coming at it the way you were, Shell. I'm just like, wow, I am just not. It was that was a moment of self-reflection. And put the donut down, John.
And now, you know, even now, of course, because we always reference Friends, you had Brad Pitt in the Thanksgiving one where, you know, Phoebe says, "Oh, just take your shirt off and tell us." So,
Leonardo DiCaprio whored himself out in Basketball Diaries.
Oh, that's right. You know, that's sad. Yeah, that was.
Well, and then bring up one of our favorite movies, Less Than Zero.
Oh
the
my
scene
God.
where is it
Right.
Jamie Gertz opens the door and there's Robert Downey Jr. on the floor with, listen, no body shaming here, but the most disgusting fat guy on the planet they picked for the other side of that. And he was doing it. I mean, he was whoring himself out for drugs. So, I mean, everywhere. So good to see. It's a topic that works.
Yeah, I think as a teenager went as one for Halloween a couple times. It was even a thing in Halloween. You know what I mean? Like that's what you did. You got ripped up tights and you followed the trope.
But we've said it when we talked about what was Julia Roberts' movie called? Pretty Woman.
Pretty Woman.
That, you know, she got out of it. We always laugh that her best friend, we can never remember her name, but her best friend, who is so important throughout the beginning of that movie, just gets tossed to the wolves.
Oh, she's like, bye, see ya.
Into her new life. She's not like, hey, we'll help you find a job. And what obviously my husband's, he proposes or whatever at the end, flowers, it's coming. She doesn't save her. She doesn't pull her out of that life. She's like, you know what? You're good. And that brings us full circle to a Mean Girls moment. Because when you step on the neck of your best friend on your way out of hookerdom, I don't know what's more Mean Girl than that.
We talked about that one before because you don't really think about that. But yeah, she's like, see ya. Bye-bye. I'm out here.
Pretty sure I may have been a hooker for Halloween a year in college. I don't remember. I'm pretty sure I probably was at least once.
I think we all tried it a few times, like whatever, you know.
Favorite hooker?
Favorite hooker.
Yeah.
I was going to mention Kevin mentioned that no one picked. We did, Kevin. We did talk about Jamie Lee Curtis.
Kit DeLuca. God bless you, JC. Yeah. Good memory. I'm sorry, I got excited. Kit DeLuca.
That was
the other hooker's name,
right? Yeah, yeah.
What were you saying, Chris? I'm so sorry.
That's right. I was just mentioning that Kevin had said no one had picked Jamie Lee Curtis in Trading Places. Well, like we did talk about her Ophelia. I mean,
At length for sure. So yeah, who's your before we move on to the reveal? I need a favorite hooker from both of you.
Favorite hook.
Mine's Rebecca De Mornay. I mean, in Risky Business, she was hot, she was smart, she played him, and then she turns and has a moment where she helps him turn the tide back on Guido the Killer Pimp. I mean, that's probably mine. I know the easy answer is Julia is from Pretty Woman, but I'd give Kit DeLuca an honorable mention. But my favorite hooker is Rebecca De Mornay.
Yeah.
Chris?
I mean, I would say Rebecca De Mornay as well, but I also would have to like bend the rules a little bit and say Salma Hayek and From Dusk Till Dawn. Even though I know she was a stripper and not a hooker, I'm still going to go with I'm going to bend the rules a little bit and say Salma Hayek and From Dusk Till Dawn.
You know who was a real badass though as a hooker turned like something different? Demi Moore in that one movie. Where Demi Moore was a hooker and she
Striptease? Maybe she was a stripper.
Striptease.
No, is it Striptease? Where she was a hooker and then she
wasn't a hooker. Stop saying that.
Stripper. Sorry. Whatever.
There's a lot of strippers that are going to come on here and be very upset with us. It's like calling a chiropractor a doctor. They're not the same thing. And now I've just insulted chiropractors.
I have to say, never thought about it. I'd probably have to think deep about favorite hooker in a movie. So I'll just go with Risky Business with you guys as well.
I like the other hooker in Risky Business, the cross-dresser.
I forgot about that one.
Oh my God.
I forgot about that one.
I'm not what you want, but I know who you need. Oh my! Was that a cross-dresser? That was a man. Oh my God, I'd forgotten that.
What about that?
Oh, Lee, you win. You win the internet today. I am gonna make something out of that clip. I don't know what, but if I remember that, I'd forgotten that.
I forgot that too.
Oh
Somebody just mentioned Dolly Parton. You know what? I changed my mind. That's my favorite hooker in a movie. I love Best Little Whorehouse in Texas.
All right. Well.
I didn't have the bingo card for 2024. Favorite hooker.
Hooker. I had to get it in before the end. It had to be one of my episodes, right? I mean, kind of had to be. So, I mean, here's the deal. We've been on a little bit of a journey. There is someone, I'll even say it's someone that rides through these, and it's somebody we've mentioned throughout the podcast. It's been mentioned in the comments. So our co-hosts, the live studio audience, mentioned this person's name. We talked about them briefly. 3 topics were Heathers, horror, and hookers. Any thoughts?
My mind for the first 2 went immediately to Johnny Depp. Because Johnny Depp in Nightmare on Elm Street for the horror, and okay. Johnny Depp still has a Winona tattoo because him and Winona Ryder were a thing for a lot of years. So that's where my first idea went. But then I was trying to rack my brain of when Johnny Depp was a hooker or had hookers in a movie, and I can't come up with the hooker combo on there.
No, not Johnny Depp.
Not Johnny Depp.
Kevin says the link has to be Jamie Lee Curtis. It's not.
It's close. It's two-thirds. But
Lee says Heather Horror and Hooker sums up the 80s. Not going to disagree with you there. Lee, you're killing it today. John says Jamie Lee Curtis. No, it is a person. All right, I'm trying not to give it away.
Is it?
Oh, the horror is a Stephen King movie specific, and it's a movie we mentioned. So it's Heathers, a Stephen King movie, and hookers. Does that help? It's Heathers, Firestarter.
I mean,
and hookers.
Drew Barrymore?
It's not Drew Barrymore.
Who else was in Firestarter? I can't think.
Thinking like
I know
Heather Locklear.
Heather Locklear. Heather Locklear was the wife, was Drew Barrymore's mother in Firestarter. Her name is Heather. She played the mother of Drew Barrymore in Firestarter, and she starred in the TV show T.J. Hooker.
T.J. Hooker. Yep.
I was like, yeah, it can't be Drew Barrymore. No, that was good.
You said your favorite Heather was Heather Locklear. I'm like, he's on it.
Yeah.
And then people made the joke when we talked about hookers, favorite hookers of the 80s. It came back up. They're like TJ Hooker. And I'm like, oh my God, people are like literally on this. I thought this was ironclad, not solvable. And I'm like, they got it, but you guys didn't get it, but you were all around it. Yeah, Heather Locklear. I'm watching Firestarter with my daughter, and all of a sudden they flash back to the scene where he's getting the drug that mutated them. And Heather Locklear's there, and I'm like, I did not remember her being the mother. I don't think that must have been her first, because it didn't hit me to be like, oh my God, Heather Locklear's in this movie as the mom. It just didn't resonate at all. So I'd completely forgotten. Heather Locklear was a huge Heather in my upbringing, whether it was in movies, whether it was posters, which we've talked about, which were a huge part of us growing up, whether it was TV. She starred in Dynasty and TJ Hooker, both on ABC at the same time. The woman worked hard and was married to?
Who was she married to? I don't even know.
Motley Crue?
Yeah.
Tommy.
Not Tommy.
Not Tommy.
Not Tommy Lee.
Not Mick.
Yes, John. TJ Hooker was about a cop, but he was a hooker. Just like I'm a John. He was a hooker.
She was also in Melrose Place.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
She had great posters.
Okay.
She had amazing posters. And they were but they were tasteful. I mean, they weren't not overt or over the top.
No, not at all. Nope. Not at all.
She was pretty enough that she really didn't need to be that. I'm sorry, it wasn't it was she was married to both Tommy Lee and Richie Sambora. So tell me she didn't have a type.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I didn't realize she was married to Tommy Lee.
I didn't either. Must have been before Pamela.
Yeah, I was like, I really didn't realize. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, I kind of agree with was it LTR there? JTR that said Heather Thomas was better. I mean, there were different looks, to your point. Like Heather Locklear had a much, I don't know, like you said, like a Heather Thomas poster was very different than a Heather Locklear poster.
Yes.
Yeah.
Trying to catch up with the comments. I can't believe she's 63. I have a hard time with actors and actresses, pop culture icons of our youth that step out of the spotlight for a while, because while they're gone, they stay kind of cemented in the age I last saw them. And Heather Locklear falls into that category for me, because she may have done a lot of stuff I'm not aware of, but I haven't seen it. So to me, she's still that Melrose Place, still that image. And to see her now at 63, a beautiful woman, but she's a beautiful woman of 63. And I'm remembering a younger woman of 29, 30, 31. It's amazing. It's kind of like, boom, it just hits me.
You know what? As I'm looking on here.
What's funny, Chris?
Record hound.
Oh. I said he had a type.
That's what a smart woman does.
Oh, God, that was funny.
What, are you calling my wife stupid? Hold on. Rochelle said you're dumb. And by the way, I have a newfound respect for Scott.
I hope he's listening. I haven't seen him on here yet. I haven't seen him on here yet. So
please says I didn't even laugh because it's true. Holy moly. Right on cue. We yeah, that was something. 80s posters. Oh, here's one for you, Shell.
What?
80s posters were a second place to Farrah's red bathing suit. Farrah's red bathing suit was a topic on our show. That's
Yes.
how iconic that moment was. Shell had a moment where that red bathing suit played through as the topic because it showed itself up over and over again. It's on Farrah, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and Baywatch.
I can hear you. It's delayed on the thing, but I hear it now.
Hey, Johnny Holmes, why don't you come on and say hi? Oh, God.
Yeah, that was one of our early podcasts, though. Farrah's red bathing suit. It was a real trigger because one of the most iconic scenes from Fast Times at Ridgemont High when Phoebe Cates comes out, she's got the red bathing suit on, and then the other time it was Baywatch because of all them running down with their red bathing suits.
Kristen, from your mouth to God's ear.
I need some water.
I don't know. I'm a 5'9" white guy. I'm not gonna pretend to be more than I am. How's your bingo card doing, Chris?
It's all full now.
Oh my God. Kevin says on Melrose Place, Heather Locklear was always listed as a special guest star. That was a negotiating tactic, Kevin. Thank you for bringing us back. She got paid more as a result of that.
Oh.
So if she got to renegotiate her salary week to week as a special guest star as she felt she needed to, whereas kept her from ever going under contract. Pretty smart, I think.
I will say it is interesting how, those posters, I mean, especially like Heather Locklear and Heather Thomas, I mean, that was a huge thing, no pun intended, back in the 80s. And so many of them, made a good deal of money on the side with those posters. I can tell you I had multiple ones.
You made posters where?
I think Samantha Fox was probably
you made money on your posters?
What? What? I missed it totally.
We're all listening. You said something about making good money for posters, and you have a poster out there somewhere.
Yeah, thankfully there was nothing to capture that moment back in the day.
Did I ask Scott to swing by for a sec? Because the OG just caught it. Because if I did, that was a Freudian moment. I didn't mean it.
Oh my God, my eyes are watering. I'm crying. Oh my God. That's
I'm still looking for. I got a small one on the bingo card. Now there's guesses in the comments, John. Oh, you're still Greek. Oh my God.
Oh my God.
It's not how sharp the pencil is, it's how well you sign your name, and us Gen Xers still know how to write in cursive.
Oh, yes, getting mascara and miles will make them tear up. Listen, as soon as I laugh really hard, one of the first things that I do, if I'm laughing super hard, my eyes just water. Like, I will be crying. People have asked me, like, is something wrong? I'm like, no, I was just laughing at something like crazy. That's when I cry, it means it was funny.
But I will say, like Heather Locklear, to bring this back to some sanity and just to speak for a moment about what our topic was, she was smart. She was like somebody bringing up the guest star thing on Melrose Place. She was a businesswoman. She knew how to play the game. She knew how to get herself out there, whether it was multiple television shows at the same time. You mentioned monster movies, Shell. She starred in Swamp Thing, where she was the girl being held in the monster's arms. That was
that was Adrienne Barbeau.
No, Swamp Thing, the DC Comics.
Because Adrienne Barbeau was one of my first memories.
Yeah, no, Heather Locklear was in Swamp Thing, which was a DC Comics rendition of Swamp Thing. So she was even in monster movies. So, I mean, she ran the gamut of going through there, and then just feels like, okay, I'm done. But she wasn't rare in the 80s. There were so many strong women that were able to say, okay, I'm pretty. I can have sex appeal. I can make this work to my advantage. I can unapologetically put on a bathing suit and go on a poster. And I'm not apologizing to anyone about what that may or may not do for women's empowerment, because what it does for this woman's empowerment is makes me a player in the industry where I'm making millions of dollars and being able to do all kinds of things. And I think that message, I hope that message still resonates. You know, again, I talk about Gen Z policing some aspects of their pop culture and not others. They'll be the first to come at me. My daughter might be the first to come at me and say, well, you know, she should be ashamed of herself. But dancing in a bathing suit on TikTok is your way of getting there. That's okay, but not doing it on a poster. You guys are real selective about your moral outrage, whereas we weren't.
Well, somebody said earlier, I think Kevin said earlier that, you know, to your point about only in the 80s could Samantha Fox be in Playboy and release a rock album.
Yeah.
So, you know, you do one thing and then you create this brand, and that brand allows you to do all these other things. And it's not, I mean, you know, regardless of how we talk about different celebrities and musicians, it's not easy to create a brand. You have to have some ability to market yourself in order to create a brand.
I start coughing after I start crying.
I'm done. I'm gone. I'm finished. This one took me out.
But hey, like Kim Kardashian, I mean, she was just an assistant to Paris Hilton, and, you know, granted, she had famous dad, famous mom, you know, famous connections and things, but, you know, a lot of her stuff started with the tape.
Yeah.
Actually might be my favorite hooker.
Who's that?
Kim Kardashian.
G the OG says Charo could play the hell out of that guitar, and I've got no idea what I missed. Alrighty then. I'm out. I'm done. I'm finished. I've talked about things I didn't think I would be talking about in this episode, but that's what you get when Jono brings out the topics in the and the last one is hookers.
Oh,
what do you guys think? Good episode? You have fun?
Excellent episode, but I'm gonna have to like I don't know. I'm gonna have to come up with something next time that's gonna also be a little bit like, maybe we'll get you guys to blush. I don't know.
It's the fun part for me, but I'd like to hand out points. I don't have any to give today. You guys didn't earn your money this week when it comes to points.
Yeah, I got no points.
Okay.
I got Johnny Depp for 2 connections, though. He wasn't real.
And Chris literally said the words Heather Locklear.
Heather Locklear, yeah.
Yeah, I got it. I got points for today.
Now he's thinking of Heather Locklear. His points are coming later.
I think I might buy a poster. My JC Kryptonite Fitness says my wife is taking my keyboard. Didn't Apollonia do porn and music? This is going in the wrong direction, which means it's exactly the time to end the episode. Guys, on behalf of me and Chris and Shell, I want to thank you guys. Now, if you're catching this episode on replay or for the first time on a Saturday, normal time for our show is Friday at 5:30 p.m. Life gets in the way. We might move it around from time to time. But that's if you want to catch us regularly, Friday at 5:30 p.m. Right here on YouTube is the place to catch it. I always say bring a friend next time. Go on the YouTube page, share it. Share the episode out. See if you enjoyed it. Maybe others will as well. Cannot thank you guys enough. We'll see you next week when Chris Clues is our host. And hopefully we'll come up with something.
It won't be like, mine will be a little bit different.
Music aficionados, stay tuned. There's always a musical component to something.
There'll always be a musical component in mine. So, Record Hound, I mean, judging by your name, I expect you there.
Yeah.
I'm out. Peace from me.
It was I loved it.
Good night, everybody. Let me get our outgoing music.
Can I bring a hooker?
Bring a hooker. You're paying.
That was great.
All right, give it a minute.
Thanks to the mods.